Ryan Day is an offensive coach again, and he's working on third downs. Fourth down. They got 1 out of 2 on that. That's Bill Landis, Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. These are snap judgments on a Tuesday after Ohio State's weekly press conference, where what did we learn outside of the fact that Ryan Day is not going to be in defensive meetings this week?
I don't know what we learned. We honestly, that was the least informative, low-energy situation I think I may have seen in that room. And, whatever, maybe it means nothing, right? Ryan Day was the one who said actions, not words on Saturday, right? So maybe it's not worth getting hyper-fixated on what they chose to say and not say, and all that matters is what they put on the field on Saturday. But I thought that was a pretty crappy game they played against Nebraska, and then no one wanted to seem to own that very much, which was a little discouraging. I think if you're a fan hoping that Ohio State finds a way to put its best foot forward on Saturday at Penn State.
Yeah. No, the reality, I'm glad you brought up Ryan Day and, going back to the offensive side of the ball, because that was offensive as hell in there, to be honest. But it's Tuesday, and I'm full of positivity.
Are you?
I don't think, and people will scoff at this, if you're going to come out of this weekend and say that was an aberration, we're moving on, it doesn't matter in the big picture of things, then focusing too much on the minutia and the why did we play poorly, blah, 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 I think I can understand saying, screw it, we're moving forward. We're gonna fix the issues and we're moving forward. We don't need to relitigate them. That being the case, I did think it was interesting. A week ago, we only talked to Ryan Day. This week, we talked to Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles. Last week, it seemed like Ryan Day was speaking as the voice for the entire program. And then today, it seemed like no one really wanted to take accountability for anything that happened on Saturday, as Bill said. So to me, I'm trying to find the way to thread that needle between we're moving on from Saturday, it doesn't matter, to this is our program and we didn't prepare our players and we're going to be better this week. And I don't know, I didn't really get a good vibe. But I'm trying not to worry about the vibe because it's Positive Tuesday.
Yeah, it doesn't. I made this point a lot before, how somebody treats a press conference doesn't ensure anything when it comes to a game. Today's Tuesday. The way they practice is going to be a lot more important than what Ryan Day, Chip Kelly, or Jim Knowles say in the team room to the media. But I've also made a point a number of times that the coaching staff has a chance, an opportunity to set the tone for not only the locker room, but the tenor of the week and to the fan base to take some cues from that. And that, to me, felt like an incredible missed opportunity to say, that's not acceptable. That's not going to happen again. We're going to do this, that, and the other thing. Ryan Day, I thought, was the only 1 out of 3 that was really doing that, because he is hyper fixated on them going 1 for 10 on third downs, and that's going to get all of his energy. I'd be surprised if Ohio State's not improved there, although a lot of that
get worse.
That will be contingent on how they can block things.
You could get one play worse.
You could get 10% worse.
Yeah. I mean, Penn State was pretty close to that a year ago offensively, so that was worse. But I mean, I didn't think I was going to have to ever revisit this again, which was what, a point I was making with you guys a year ago or in some of the offseason press conferences or last December, missed opportunities for not just public relations, which again, you can put no stock in that at all if you want. The message from the top down, Berm, you talked about the leadership of the veterans and, their voices. If that is the way that this team is going to talk about one of the biggest games on the schedule in the week ahead, and maybe they won't once they get out there in 3 hours, low energy, to use your term, Bill, uninspiring. I thought that was one of the more bizarre hours I've ever spent in the team meeting room.
Do you think that the motto, the mantra that's sort of evolved over the last year of Woody versus the world instead of Ohio versus the world is actively working as a negative when it comes to how the program is relating to the fan base? Because I think sometimes coaches like Brian Kelly, for example, at LSU, and I think he's embarrassing 90% of the time. But when you watch the way they lost the USC game and you saw him on the podium slamming his fist and, we're not going to let this happen. And yeah, they let it happen against Texas A&M, but Texas A&M's apparently maybe good. The fan base, really embraced Ryan Day's insanity last year about Lou Holtz. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The rest of college football was like, oh my God, what's wrong with that guy? But the fan base was like, yes, that's the coach we want to see, that passion. And then it seems like at times they are pushing back against, like, we can't let what the fans think matter. We can't let what anyone says outside of this building matter. But the state of Ohio is what matters to Ohio State, and vice versa. So at some point, don't you just lean into it and stand up there like you're saying and say, that sucked. We are better than that. We are not going to allow this to occur.
I think you're onto something there. I don't know, there's like a vibe in the building sometimes where maybe they feel like there's like too much finger pointing at them for not playing up to the Ohio State standard sometimes. And maybe at times that is true. I think that has been true in the past at times. I don't think that is the case now.
It's not applicable to Saturday.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. Like they came off of a loss where like at one point lost to what is now the number one team in the country, and I think a team that a lot of people think is the best team in college football. I'm not saying that's acceptable, but like it wasn't like that game was a travesty.
Right. And the fan base, I think, responded fairly to
mostly, I think.
60%.
But that should be like a kick in the pants, right? To like make you really ratchet things up and start to show some upward trajectory with this team. And it just didn't happen. And then the reaction to that today just sort of felt like, oh, well, like crap happens. Like, I don't know. There was not a lot of urgency on the field on Saturday, in my opinion. And I didn't sense much from the coaches today. Again, maybe that means nothing. But there was an opportunity there, I think, to your point, Austin, to project some different kind of vibes going into what is not only a big game, but like one of the biggest regular season games, especially non-Michigan regular season games that Ohio State has played in quite some time with what's at stake, I think, on Saturday.
It's number 3 versus number 4. It's
Well,
like
and
it's
also like a loss. Like
Yeah.
a loss doesn't knock you out of the playoffs. It puts you in a pretty precarious situation. Like
It's a Big Ten championship eliminator in all
yeah,
likelihood.
it is that, I think, right? And it's just like it didn't feel like that. Maybe it'll feel different tomorrow night when we're in here, but it didn't feel like that on Tuesday.
Yeah, I think the part that to me makes Saturday different, why it's not applicable to this, is the people behind this wall, behind the camera, they're the ones that set the standard, not us. We can talk about it, and if they're meeting it, and I don't think it's asking too much.
Meeting something that they have established.
They are the ones that are talking about that, and there's just no world where anything they did on Saturday rises to that. And all we wanted to know was like maybe why that was. And 21-17 after 2 weeks, and saying that they're going to be angry. Was anybody angry other than Caleb Downs and Will Howard on Saturday? In my opinion, the answer, maybe Cody Simon, is probably no. There was some anger, I think, from the way that the defensive line reacted when they got sacks that suggested that they were mad about the way that they were being evaluated. Ty Hamilton, when I talked to him on the notebook, sort of alluded to the criticism that they have taken for that. Like, honestly, I would be okay with them getting that out of their system and saying that stuff publicly, but it's all bubbling up inside of here in a way that I don't feels like the previous couple years and looks unhealthy and not effective. They actually, as they realized, I think maybe, I hope they realized, when the crowd got behind them after the botched ejection call and the targeting on Saturday, oh boy, everybody rose together and met the moment.
Well, it's kind of like your family, right? Like, you can say whatever you want about your brother or sister, but the minute someone else does, then you're ready to punch them in the face. And I think that's how I've been pretty critical of the fan base, right? But the fan base got loud and made an impact in that moment. But what you're saying is like, lean into that.
Yeah.
Because what you're saying, the Woody against the world thing will not work. They need the fan base on their side.
Yeah.
Like that, it will elevate them. The power of, and this is a stupid thing for us maybe to even be talking about on a Tuesday snap judgment when they're going on the road to play Penn State, and maybe none of this matters, but like something about the mentality of this team feels off to me. And we only talked to 3 coaches, and that was not the way that any of those 3 people normally talk.
No. Yeah, something I can't put my finger on it though, right? Like I wish I could articulate better what I think is off, but yeah, there is some kind of disconnect happening, and maybe it's like a recalibration, like within their minds and within the building, that the season is different because now one loss does not upend everything you're trying to strive for, right? So maybe because of that, you don't want to ratchet everything up to 11 coming off of that loss to Oregon. I don't know. Maybe in my own mind, I'm having a hard time kind of calibrating that myself, but I just don't. The mindset seems a little kind of misdirected here with Ohio State not necessarily having its backs against the wall, but maybe I wish it were acting a little more like that was the case. I don't know.
It just felt like a lot of cross signals and like the buzzword over the weekend was everyone on the same page, right? Like that's what we were talking about for the last week. And none of the really answers seem to like jive with that, or even with people being on the same page in their own mind. Ryan Day talking about how you keep running the ball because you need to establish the run, because you have to establish the run, but then saying you can't keep throwing the ball because sometimes the throw, it's not there. Like, I don't.
Chip Kelly did the same thing. He started an answer when he was asked about the number of rushing attempts on Saturday. And he was like, well, sometimes you have to work through things so that you can get better at it for the rest of the year. And then 3 seconds later, he's like, but we also had to win the game. Well,
right. So they waited to throw the ball until the fourth quarter's final drive to win the game. So like I think it was Joel Klatt who basically suggested that on Monday, was that Ohio State was tinkering for the season, not really worried about Nebraska on Saturday. And then when they decided to score at the end of the game, that's all they had to do. But like, that's weird, right? Like, that's weird.
It was a one possession game at halftime.
Yeah.
And then they were losing in the fourth quarter. Yeah.
So practice is gone. And I think Chip Kelly caught himself. Like, maybe he was admitting in the moment that is what they were trying to do, and that they were more concerned about getting ready for Penn State. But he immediately tried to take it back and say that they had to do the things to win the game. But they didn't do that until the final drive. Like, if you have 12 total targets for Emeka Egbuka, Carnell Tate, and Jeremiah Smith, you are doing something wrong.
I think it's pretty clear that Nebraska did not have their full attention, and they probably thought they were going to get a wounded Nebraska team that had just lost by 50 to Indiana. Instead, it got a very motivated Nebraska team that played maybe its best game of the season, and that's why the game looked that way, because Ohio State did not respond in kind with its own motivation coming off of
Don't you think they'd be better off just admitting that, though? I mean, I guess that's my point.
Yeah, no, I think so. I
think it's a reasonable
They
take.
really offered nothing in the way of explanations or even excuses, frankly, which I wouldn't have much time for, but they didn't offer anything like to kind of contextualize what was on the field on Saturday.
But it is a reasonable explanation if you say, look, we lost the Oregon game, we've got Penn State in our mind, we were trying to tinker on the offensive line. Just say it, because I think even though people will be like, damn, that's kind of whack for a team like this to be able to
just own it.
Just say that's the case. And I don't know if it is the case. I think it probably is part of the case.
Or you just say that it's never going to happen again. Like,
or that.
I mean,
I don't know. I go back to Saturday's game, and we're not going to, again, relitigate everything that happened. But that game goes way different if Ohio State Nebraska dropped the opening kickoff, dropped the first handoff, has a 20-yard punt. I don't understand the mentality of Ohio State in that situation, coming out from the 30-yard line and not throwing to the end zone on the first play.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's like, well, okay, we're just going to ho-hum. Like,
it's back to the killer instinct thing.
Yeah.
I think this team desperately lacks.
I don't know where that comes from, because, again, I feel like I know Ryan Day fairly well. I know he has a killer instinct. I just don't know why it doesn't translate to the team on Saturdays.
Yeah.
And
killer instinct Monday to Friday. I don't care about.
It's weird. It's weird. I mean, he said he was frustrated, and nobody asked him today, but like I know on Saturday it looked like he was ready to take the play call sheet and start.
He did have a play call sheet in his hand.
Which is the first time he's had that happen all year, I think. So, like, he clearly wanted to be like, this is not enough.
I missed that. Yeah, it's interesting.
It was at the end of the third quarter.
Okay.
All right.
I guess I'm not offering this as like an excuse for anything. College football is weird, and teams can look like absolute dog crap one week and then look like the best team in the country the next week, like i.e. Georgia. Mm-hmm. So like, I just wanted to be clear. I don't think anything that we're saying, which I think is all fair, is like guaranteeing that Ohio State's going to come out and lay an egg against Penn State.
Right, and neither does their energy level at the podium.
And even like because we would probably say like, hey, man, when the first time we talked to them after the Oregon game, it was like, all right, maybe they're figuring some stuff out. They're having some hard conversations, and they played like awful against Nebraska, right? So one thing does not necessarily correlate to the other. I guess is just what I want to say.
All right, so I can hear everyone suggesting that we stop analyzing a press conference and stop talking about it. We'll move on to the next thing, which is, I guess the door's open for Zin Mahalski, Bill, and I frankly am stunned by that.
I think that's Ryan Day perhaps fumbling with his words a little bit in an effort to be coy about an injury unnecessarily. Like, do any of us think that Zemmelhowski's is going to play on Saturday?
No, but I also
I
don't
don't
think
either.
Lathan Ransom is going to play on Saturday, and
Neither
that
do I.
seemed to be
Yeah.
like
we've been through this song and dance with what we understand the injury may be for Lathan Ransom.
But
You've seen this before,
for him
America.
and Jim Knowles to say we're going to get a full week of practice out of Lathan. Like,
Yeah.
I don't. If they are, that's a surprise. So I
Great,
don't.
if that's the case.
I don't want to assume they're just lying to us, but like that would be a shock if Lathan Ransom has a full week of practice based on what we've heard is his issue.
Do you remember? I'm going to pull a name.
With Lathan Ransom?
No, I'm going to pull a different name out of the air and see if it'll play. Remember the Emeka Ibuka injury?
Yes.
Remember when it was like, well, he's going to practice this week, and then we'll see how it goes.
Yes.
I would be amazed if there aren't similarities between those two situations.
I would also be amazed, which is why I feel like we've done this before. Let's not do this again.
I'll just say believe it when you see it, and don't pay attention to anything that's said about injuries in a press conference, because 99%
Especially a
of the
Tuesday press
time they're misleading. Yeah.
So, but the other part of that, Bill, was that if Zen Mahalski was available, and maybe it's feeding off of what you said, that it doesn't actually mean anything because they don't plan on Zen Mahalski being back, but they're like, well, if he's healthy, he could be the starting left tackle on Saturday.
Yeah, but then he was asked a follow-up and pulled back on it. He's not going to play. I would be shocked if he plays. And even if he were healthy, I don't know that 100% he would play either, because yes, he was asked if Zen was healthy, could he play this week? And Ryan said yes. And then later it was like, are you sure? And he's like, well, he didn't play very well against Nebraska, so we'll evaluate that. There would be questions about it either way. I think he just kind of put his foot in his mouth there for a temporary moment when asked initially a yes or no question about Zen Mahalski's availability. Donovan Jackson, they said, is going to get reps at left tackle this week. Carson Hinsman, it sounds like, will at least do some guard and center work in practice. The explanation for Luke Montgomery playing, I think if I understood it correctly, was that Austin Sareveld has only been practicing at right guard since Donovan Jackson came back, and Luke Montgomery was the number 2 left guard in practice, so then he was the number 2 left guard to go into the game.
In a pinch for one play.
Did one of those two guys start multiple games at left guard this year, or did that not happen?
Yeah, that's a little maybe too strict of adherence to the straight depth chart, maybe. But I guess my view on that then would be that if Donovan's going to practice him at left tackle, then I would think that Austin Sareville would practice him at left guard, and I'm not anticipating Luke Montgomery starting at left guard. Maybe Carson Hinsman, perhaps. I don't know. He has started 12 games. He didn't. I guess he didn't play at Beaver Stadium the last time they were there, but he's at least played against Penn State. So I'm guessing it's Donovan Jackson at left tackle and Austin Sareville at left guard, if I can kind of read through all the kind of verbal gymnastics that were happening in there on Tuesday.
I'm not going to pretend to read through the verbal gymnastics because I don't really have a clue. When you're saying you're going to rep Carson Hinsman, who has essentially vanished over the last 3 weeks and has not played at all when all of this offensive line shuffling has happened, to now suggest that he's going to take some reps at center as though you're maybe considering moving Seth McLaughlin.
No, I think he's going to take reps at guard because he's only been at center. Which is why he didn't play guard at all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That maybe makes more sense. Sorry, I'm trying to run the live stream during the middle of the press conference.
Listen, nothing was said clear and concise on there.
As I said to Bill on the daily, confused is now my natural state, so welcome aboard.
It's just, there's a lot of what? I don't know. Whoa, Gabe Powers type of moments.
Yeah. Gabe Powers did not come up in this press conference. You did not miss that.
I don't know. I mean, I don't expect Zemmelhowski to play. That's what
I think that's what it comes down to.
Okay. Whew. Anything else football related that you want to get out on some Snappy Jays? Because a lot of it was like coach speak jibber jabber.
I think Jim Knowles did say that they did clearly tinker with how they're going to generate some pressure, and they did that against Nebraska. All 3 sacks came with an extra kind of pressure element there. So that was one thing that pretty clearly they talked about and worked on after the Oregon game that was on display a little bit. I don't know that it was on display maybe to the extent that people hoped it would be, and some of the stuff with the defense was still a bit puzzling. He also said that it wasn't good enough, which I appreciated. So Jim Knowles, I think Ryan Day was Chip Kelly was just like, we're good, which I don't necessarily agree with. Ryan Day I think was a little different than that. Jim Knowles was we were better than we were against Oregon. It was not good enough. It needs to be better than it was against Nebraska, which I appreciated.
I don't. People may disagree with me out there in the YouTubes. I don't think Ryan Day is generally prone to coach speak. I think he measures his words. I think he's careful to not reveal too much, but I don't think he's generally like coach speak guy.
No, I think that's part of the reason why he says things that are confusing.
Right.
Because he hasn't mastered the ability to say a lot of words.
Today was an attempt at coach speak in a lot of ways that I felt like because he doesn't generally do it, you're like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So I hope he doesn't practice it, because I'd like to get back to the more forthright discussion about things. And
I think it was actually like a better example of the way his brain works, which is you asked something about leadership, and he said you'd see better leadership if they converted more third downs. Like
execution fuels emotion.
Like that's the only thing that he can think about right now is converting third downs.
And I probably could have asked that question a little better.
You asked the question fine,
but like
he just
with Ryan, it's actually like I'm watching nonverbal cues most of the time. Like when he wants to answer a question, his head naturally starts to nod to the answer, and then he will like not. So you could see when I said
when he does that. When he doesn't, he goes like this.
Yeah. When I said the leaders are Will Howard and Caleb Downs and Seth McLaughlin, he's nodding, and then tries to like list a couple of the guys like Cody Simon, who we talked about on the live show on Monday. Like Cody Simon leads his own way. Tommy Eichenberg was not a vocal leader. He was an introvert, but you still knew he was the leader. Cade Stover did not lead in a vocal way. He was an introvert, but you still knew he was the leader. So when you talk about a team that has guys like JT Tuimoloau or Denzel Burke or whatever that are introverts, you can be an introvert and still be an obvious leader, and I don't see that from those guys, and that's where I get confused and concerned. And the follow-up question really should have been, does it bother you that those guys are not emerging? And I don't know that we would have gotten an answer, but it just feels like
you might have got more of an answer than asking about a wide nine.
Well, I just wanted an idea, like, because as a play caller, like, how does that change things? And he didn't answer that one either, but he knew what I was getting at. You knew
he was not going to answer
that. I know, but I felt like it's important to throw it out there because everyone knows the question and why it's being asked.
Mm-hmm. Why? Is there something wrong with the defensive line?
I think it's great. I just think
Berm is comfortable with whatever Coach Johnson decides to do.
Okay, we've made it. I don't know how far into this episode of Snap Judgments, but Jim Knowles essentially abdicating responsibility for the defensive line to Larry Johnson and saying, whatever Larry wants to do with his guys, I'm fine with. How does that make us feel?
Bad.
Well, you know how I feel about it.
Bill, you asked the question like, so what does that mean your job is, essentially?
I don't, and it's not, we are asking it specific to Larry Johnson, but I also ask like any position
Well,
coach.
that's why I tried to bring it up with Jermaine Matthews also.
Correct. Yeah, like I just don't, Jim Knowles is the head coach of the defense. I do think cedes a little too much ground with position coaches about who is on the field when and in what situations and what those guys are asked to do. I think there's a balance between like letting your roster speak to you a little bit in terms of what you are going to call. Obviously, it's the job of every good coordinator is to put whatever talent you have on hand in the best positions to succeed. But I think Jim Knowles is certainly caught in between that and like not wanting to rock the boat with his defensive assistants. I don't know, but clearly there's
he
some
also tried to pass the buck to say,
Ryan Day.
And it also involves the head coach. So like,
yeah, I don't know.
I thought
maybe he's just.
I think if there's
one
one thing we're able to really read between the lines on, it's that Ryan Day wants more rotation on the defensive line and more guys to play. Like that.
So then why wasn't there against
right,
Nebraska?
So that's what seems pretty clear to me.
Then there was even less than before.
Right.
But do we agree that Ryan Day seems pretty clear that that's something he's expecting?
But
it's also not happening.
I always have a hard time deciphering whether or not it's what he expects or whether or not he's just saying what he thinks he needs to say. Because I don't know. Because if he wanted it, wouldn't they be doing it?
You'd think.
I was told by multiple people that he did request it during the 2 weeks in the build-up to Nebraska. There's one reason why I thought, hey, maybe Edric Houston might play more. And he did play 5 snaps against Nebraska. That is one person that was targeted that I know for sure they wanted to get a better look at. And he did go on the field for a series. But then that was it. And the starters played the rest of the game. I don't believe that enough is done in-game. And Ryan Day, this is something that no one has told me this. It's what, Berm, you and I have witnessed in games, which is Ryan Day getting involved with substitution patterns on the defensive line. That was happening before Oregon. And it didn't happen on Saturday against Nebraska. following the 2 weeks where he said he was going to be more involved specifically with the coaches. So again, confused is my default state right now. I don't understand how that can possibly be. And then for Jim Knowles I felt like he was waving a white flag, and it was like, whatever they do, I'm not responsible for that anymore. Like I felt that he was totally checked out because he was asked about the starters playing 58 snaps apiece. I was like, that's, the position coach knows what he's doing.
Yeah. This is where, like, I don't think people want objectivity at times. And I'm trying to, because I've realized objectivity in these settings.
I'm objectively saying what I've seen from this team.
But objectively, I feel like if you say Ryan Day is 6 years into being a head coach, like that feels like it should be enough time to learn how to be a head coach in some ways. Mm-hmm. I know Kirby Smart wouldn't let Trey Scott at Georgia dictate to him what was going on the field if Kirby Smart wanted something done. And especially for a guy who we all agree, if this goes sideways for Ohio State, it's not Larry Johnson's legacy and reputation and career that will be A, permanently marred, but B, like entirely changed for the rest of his life. It's Ryan Day's. And so I do think that at some point it's incumbent on him to just stand up and say, this is my decision and this is what's going to happen moving forward. If you don't like it, whatever assistant coach, it's not just a Larry Johnson discussion, because as I said, there's a real conversation to be had about Jermaine Matthews needing to play more.
Or the depth of the offensive line,
right.
Recruiting, development, all those other things.
So you have to just stand up and say, this is my program. My head's the one on the chopping block. This is the way it's going to be. And that's an uncomfortable position for someone to be in if it's not your default state. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that is Ryan Day's default state, because he is someone who finds a balance between being a normal human and being an insane coach on the sideline for 3.5 hours. He's pretty good at that. Not like the former head coach here that he took over for, who was not good at that, who was insane all the time. So
laser focused, I believe.
So it's about finding that balance, but also understanding, like, it's all going to come back on you if it doesn't go right.
Well, as Berm said, this was the Positive Tuesday edition of Snap Judgments.
Hey, I'm going to go do something more fun. I got a root canal to get to. That press conference just below root canal on the idea of good times. Positive Tuesday, though.
Maybe Wednesday on the daily. The vibes will be immaculate. I don't know. Hopefully you learned something or enjoyed it, or maybe you just hate watched the whole thing. I don't know. Either way, thanks for sticking to the end of Snap Judgments on the podcast. He is Bill Landis. That's Jeremy Birmingham. I'm Austin Ward. We appreciate you all. We'll talk to you tomorrow.